So this explains. See, Frank always said, "I ain't going to write a book about myself. Fuck the book thing." So what's he do in the summer of '88? He writes his book. So he's actually looking. He's trying to find a new role for himself. So he has time to retrospect on his life as a rock star. So he writes the book in the summer of '88. He now knows that's over, and it was such a great tour. I'm glad they got at least 6 months because the music was so incredible. He had this big band. Finally, he had the full orchestra. His dream. It was just a beautiful, amazing tour. So he got the retrospective of all his music done. So that was done. So in '88, he writes a book, and then I talked to him in '80 in the fall, and we don't know what he's going to do. He's got a new album coming out, and then '89, and now he's a businessman. Now he's still on the music side of himself, saying, "What am I going to do next music?" So he's doing Saint Clavier. It's not marketable, so he can't do anything with it. But when he discovered you're saying the Ensemble Moderne, well, he now had something.
Well, but in the meantime, though, to me, the learning curve on the Saint Clavier was so steep, and given the early problems with the machine itself, but he, I think, you know, right away knew the potential and could fill the potential, and you know, of course, just wound up filling.
Well, you mean he actually saw that he could bypass the uncommerciality? Oh yeah, it was getting better in the late '80s.
Oh yeah, you know, the sample stuff, and then I mean, there was the quality of the sampling and storage, and so as he could improve the quality of the samples, he could improve the performances, and he could also kept having to add storage to keep all these samples in line. And then there was the problems with the Saint Clavier operators, the guys that came in to program the machine and make the transition from the early machine state to the state it is now with Todd and just the maintenance of it.
And it was getting easier to do all that.
Right, and then he was able to make not just the keyboard changes, but the dots, as you were talking about.
Yeah.
And then
so in 1991, he sees a potential.
And so,
here.
well, to me, he was just then filling up the machine.
Okay.
I mean,
and he maybe was going to do some kind of performance with it.
Well, we recorded twice with him. Like once was a pitch session almost for Saint Clavier, as a way of selling how to use the machine, how to sell the machine, how to whatever. And it seemed to me at that point it was a way. I mean, he was trying to deal with how to perform with.
He was getting ready with his new band, which was this thing.
Right.
Now, what's the date on that?
But it wasn't entertainment.
No.
This was 91.
So 90, he's doing Why Not 90. 90.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. This has to be. This is earlier. This is before
89?
that. 88, 89.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, he does have the Saint Clavier in the tour, the '88 tour.
Right, but at the house, he's because we did when we did P. Fiatco, which was 89, end of '89.
So is that when this pitch idea was being?
But no, that was before, in '88.
But after the tour, you could say it's after the tour.
Yeah.
So he's already thinking this in late '88. Okay, so he's planning. Then Why Not is something new that he does that.
And that takes up quite a bit of time, just.
And if that really took off, he'd even be busier with that. But if it didn't take off, he was then going to do something with the Saint Clavier.
Yeah, and then actually, we were doing P. Fiatco with Henning. And,
he's seen it, we know it.
And that's how Henning introduced Frank to the Ensemble Moderne.
And that was in '90, I guess, right?
And so when they came over to start the Yellow Shark rehearsals,
summer of '91.
Yeah. Then that was at the point at where he saw this was the new band finally that could play all these the American composer Frank stuff. Yeah. And then
so his new band was coming. He saw it.
Right.
And Scott, who even though he was still friendly with Frank, even though all that fiasco happened. Frankie had defended Scott in a way, didn't he, in the end? So Scott would come
Scott didn't really leave the camp until Dweezil didn't tell him he was fired.
Right.
But he fired him.
and that was in '92, '93 or something, right?
I don't know.
So the other guys leave, but Mike and Scott are hanging around Frank.
They're still around.
So Scott is going, oh my God, I'm not in the band anymore. Right. He saw that, eh?
Yeah.
That's
that
interesting.
Yeah, I wish I missed that on camera. I've always, I mean,
you wish you had that on camera?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great transition right there in Joe's garage between Scott just walking out of the studio with the ensemble there, Frank there, and Scott leaving and just
And saying that to you privately.
yeah.
So Scott realizes the rock reality's kind of over. I mean, he was hanging around to see what would happen next. Maybe he'd be part of it. And
Right.
Did he do sampling during the modern thing? Was Scott part of the sampling process? Probably not. He was just watching, right?
Right.
So he was gone. He was fired.
But
He was out of it.
They sampled everything. I mean, Frank had they sampled all the musicians and
Yeah.
multiphonics and just
Yeah, of
straight-
that, of
yeah.
the modern gang.
Yeah.
So if Frank hadn't died, it would have been real interesting to see what he would have
Well,
done.
the other thing that I made a note of was that you were talking of musicals, and I always
Yeah.
thought it was operas. I mean,
So that goes.
Yeah,
those are
that-
two levels. It's
yeah.
always the highbrow and the lowbrow.
Right.
I have that in my notes.
Yeah.
But in that kind of conversation, you just.
Right.
But you're right. The freak out is a ballet, which is ballet or opera. It's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Absolutely Free was called an opera.
Well, that's because it's definitely with the ensemble. He
He was getting ready to do he was going towards an opera then.
Right.
He talked about that. That
Well,
was Diofa.
and then in Frankfurt, which was the validation of the American composer.
He now had grounding for the 90s
Right.
to do an opera. He
Right.
had the resume.
Right, and I know he'd gotten a commission, and he was
You're
working.
right, in Vienna. They had a commission. Remember
Right.
that, Jerry? So he was already knew what he was going to do.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's important. Yeah, he was going to
Yeah,
do an
and
opera.
he was he was
That would have been the real ending of his
just
career.
strong enough to make the few performances in Frankfurt. But yeah, no, that was to me that
was the final masterpiece.
Right.
If he could have done
and
that.
Civilization
Is that?
is
Yeah.
the beginning and the ending.
Does it say that? Does it say it's an opera in Civilization Phase 3? I forget.
No, but the funny is because Lost Episodes has this is a real groovy teenage opera, Captain Beefheart.
Oh yeah,
And
back
one
in the late 50s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was way back.
Or 62. Was that maybe a little later? That's that
Yeah,
funny, the teenage malt shop.
Teenage Mouse
Yeah,
Shop.
yeah. So, well, that's interesting because, yeah, he says in Hit Parader in '68 he wants to do a science fiction Broadway musical, but it could be an opera. He could take any, he could go high road or low road, whatever the opportunities gave him. That's an important point that so Civilization Phase 3, it doesn't say it's an opera, or maybe it does. I've read the liner notes carefully. I can't remember though. But it is an opera.
Well, it looks like one. I mean,
it is.
just-
It's an
and
opera.
When you see the
Or it's a ballet. Remember he presented those mid-'80s ballets up in San Francisco with the puppets and that? So that's it. It's an opera inside the piano. So that really is a good way. You always wanted to do that as well as be the pop star.
and a very Italian thing too.
Right, it's right. I remember in interviews he had the opera, and the opera was called Dio Fa, wasn't it? That was
I don't
God
remember,
Lies.
but I know
It's in
he
the
was
book.
working
Oh.
on the plane.
Yeah, it was the first. He said Dio Fa on the Life magazine spread with the family.
In '88.
Yeah,
That was in
that's when
88.
it was first announced.
So he already had the opera idea. Well, he always had it for 25 years. But you're saying in '88 he sees the value of the synclavier. He knows the opera is a possibility. But it isn't until '91 that he sees the team he can work with to do the opera.
I just knew that on the plane back from Frankfurt.
You were you over there and filmed all that?
Yeah. And he's working on it in
the seat.
in first class.
He was working on his opera, and he had met with people over there.
Oh yeah, and it was
going to happen.
Yeah, and later at the house, he was speaking in a very concrete way about that he had gotten this together and
yeah, he did talk about it in some of the last interviews. So what happened in '93 that his health was just impossible to do?
Well, but then the Varese too.
That's what Matt Groening wants to do, doesn't he? They're going to do the fucking opera. Have you heard of those rumors? Matt Groening he's going to, John and somebody had on the internet that there's rumors that Matt Groening wants to do Civilization Phase 3.
Oh.
Yeah, so maybe that's what Matt's working on.
Well, I knew Matt was working on something, but just as a service for Gail, he says I'm not really doing it. I just know some dancer, choreographer who I connected with Gail because she wanted to do something. But who said that Frank was like the Johnny Carson? You? Or
Yeah, that was
the TV show.
Mm.
Well, that goes way back too because.
Well, that's what he wanted in 1970. That's what he said in Hit Parader. He wanted to have a TV
I think
project.
even before that, because I remember seeing some document where he wanted.
You mean like 66, 67?
Yeah, he wanted a TV show and he was going to interview Johnny Otis. It was way back. and Jeff Beck.
Just one show, or to have?
No, he was already thinking his at the
He'd be
FNN.
the MC.
He was already thinking ZNN consciousness
yeah,
way
yeah.
back. So it's like the big note does not just mean a musical note.
That's right.
It's like a TV show, a letter,
any medium.
Yeah.
Anything, anywhere, anytime at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Long as he's bugging everybody, he's got some major platform to do it from, right?
Yeah.
And then that's on, Graham Wazoo or Hot Rats too. Maybe we could get on TV, be one-shot deal. Back in Cucamonga, we wanted to get on TV.
Bongo Fury.
Oh yeah,
Back in Cucamonga.
Yeah, we were thinking if we could get on TV, it would be a one-shot deal or something.
Not
no,
a one-shot
deal is part of that theme, and then there's the Cucamonga song.
Yeah, that's two different songs.
But he was talking about getting on TV. He always wanted to get on. He really wanted to get into the new medium,
Yeah.
So so the opera, could someone? Is it all? It must be all sketched out. It could be done.
Ali.
Yeah.
Oskin.
Yeah.
I'm sure has it. If there's anything on paper, you would know.
Where does he live?
He's in Germany. He was just here. I don't know if he's still here, but last week was it? Gail said something that he was here.
Are you still involved working with the Zappas?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, Gail's got this Perez thing. I mean, we're still trying to.
The album.
The album and we filmed the whole recording.
Oh yeah. You're trying to make a video.
Yeah,
for releasing it.
documentary.
And you did
about
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's getting held up because of.
And who makes the final edit decision?
Well, that's a problem because she got Rudy Dolitzel to shoot it, and so Rudy is holding the tapes hostage, and she has the music and, of course, all the rights to everything.
Right, but does she want to do the edit? I mean, who?
Well, no, she wanted him to do it. But
she wanted him to do
and
the
he
edit.
hasn't done anything.
Oh, I see.
For 2 years, and
Right.
I went to Austria and we screened all the tapes, and we had dubs made, and we were going to go ahead and get going on the edit, and that was almost 2 years ago.
Yeah. What other thoughts during?
Yeah.
I thought
That was good that you got into it and brought up these points.
Well, you're talking about Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah.
Well,
have you ever heard of? I have a quote in one of the articles that he considered his house Rumpelstiltskin decor. It's a quote. Now, have you ever heard him say that?
No, but in the Yellow Shark, the Struwwelpeter, which they didn't do.
That's the Rumpelstiltskin in their culture.
Yeah. Well, it's more. It's a somewhat similar figure, but he's the completely misbehaved child.
Yeah.
And he's always doing things wrong, and he's also being tortured.
The idiot bastard son.
Yeah, I mean it's a completely preposterous and apparently very common German character.
That's amazing. He's being the torture and everything.
Yeah.
So that all of you see, I think I hit on one of the key motifs with his dwarf motif, the Rumpelstiltskin thing. So then you could see that all of Frank's work is the crabgrass baby. Is screaming out, fucking things up, but getting the torture done to him. That's an amazing. That's an amazing.
Well, the
Strumpel. Let me see the word. It's not
Struwwel. S-T-R-E-W.
Write that down, Jerry.
S-T-R-E-W-E-L-P-E-T-E-R. It's a whole myth. There's a book. I have a copy of it, and it's this kind of redhead guy with the straggly, crazy hair, really long fingernails, and just does these it's a series of fairy tales about this character that.
But it's a child.
Yeah, it's
a demon child.
Kid stories.
Yeah.
Fairy tales for kids.
But he is a child.
Yeah, he's like.
Struwwelpeter is a child.
Yeah, but all the drawings, he's like a kind of Humpty Dumpty more.
Right, but he's a Rumpelstiltskin. He's a dwarf, an evil neighborhood guy, little dwarf midget around there, bugging everybody.
In Pifiaco, they have this old lady telling about it, right?
It's in the one I did, Afnera.
You directed Afnera?
Yeah.
There's no credits on the copy I've seen.
Right.
So is there credits on any copies?
Only the one that aired in Germany on Premiere.
So you're the director. Who's the editor?
Michael Gross.
Really? So what did Frank have to do with that?
Well, we cut it at the house.
Oh, so Frank is the co-editor?
Well, he was there the whole time.
So he gets a producer credit?
No, it was produced by a company in Germany.
What credit does Frank get?
He's the star. But
so
ending. Well, at the end of that, the end of Afnera, there's the title credits, which aren't there.
During that riot footage?
Yeah,
that
it's the
rock video at the end. Like?
Markson's Chicken.
Markson's Chicken
is the song.
Yeah.
And it's from the '88 tour. I never understood why it didn't release, because I really liked that version of the song.
I don't think I've seen a version with that. I've seen a version where the end has this rock video for, I think, a computer song. Is it an instrumental?
Yeah, it's just instrumental.
And it's sort of riot footage and stuff?
Right, and it's all from the riot footage. And Frank, we queued up 2 tapes. It's footage that he recorded on VHS during the riots off the TV. And we went through and selected hits from that selection. And then we dubbed into beta. Then we set up two machines, and Frank soloed on the switcher.
I love that.
You know, switching between the...
It's that it's
right.
flicker frame editing
Right.
that Frank... I always think Frank learned that, in a sense, from Tony Palmer, who co-directed 200 Motels, because if you look at his Cream film before 200 Motels, he has flicker frame editing. And I never really got the story. Where did Frank learn flicker frame editing? Because it's not necessarily that he learned it from Tony, but, you know, I'm always curious about that. Because
well, I mean, you know, he did a lot of film stuff, and it's just kind of automatic with some basic film artifact is that way.
But you know,
anyhow,
that's a thing. That's a technique that I know people, and they find that the most irritating of Frank's filmmaking stylistically.
Right.
You go, I hate when he flicker frame. And it's like, God dang.
Now, wait, what was the idea? Why were you talking about just before?
Because I was curious, because I've never seen credits.
Oh, what's the
on
riot
AFNA.
footage? Of what riot?
The LA riots.
You've
in
seen,
92.
Yeah,
Okay.
you've seen
Yeah.
AFNA. You've seen
That was
the
in 93,
video. It's a
93.
30-minute video.
Right.
So was this an opportunity for you, because you're usually a cameraman and not a director? Was this like your first directorial?
Yeah.
Or? Really? That's cool.
Well, yeah, Frank just said to the woman, what was her name? The German producer. Anyhow, she was the one that produced Yellow Shark for television. And they wanted a making of sort of thing, and Frank said, well, Van's got to direct it. And just kind of, you know, and I was completely happy to do it. And so I photographed, and that way I got to go to the rehearsals in Frankfurt too.
Yeah.
So we photographed, because I'd already photographed the whole rehearsals at Joe's garage. So I already was familiar with the whole thing, and so then Frank said, well, you know, I should do it, and say, hey, yeah. And then went to Frankfurt, and then came back, and then I knew that if I took the stuff to the house and set up an edit system at the house, Frank would be there.
Cool.
So
Betacam editing system?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, you know, we had a small switcher, so some effects, but he would come in, and we you know, just worked like 8-10 hours a day, but we'd come in and start editing, and then in the afternoon Frank would come down and watch what we'd done and make suggestions. Or
Cool.
That's when his day started, in the afternoon, you're saying?
yeah,
basically? Generally?
during that period of time.
Yeah.
It was about and this was in August.
Of 90...
July, August of, was it 90?
Before the Frankfurt?
Yes,
It
it
was
was
92.
92.
So this concept, when did you hear this Struppelpeter thing?
That was in Frankfurt.
Oh, that's when you
during
found it
the
out.
rehearsals. Yeah.
Who
because,
brought it up?
Well, the musicians had made, and Frank had seen some book that they'd brought to him about Struwwelpeter.
Which he doesn't know why they brought him.
Who knows?
They must have picked on the dwarf. There's some people, picked up on this dwarf thing or
Right.
something. And he showed it to him.
And anyhow, and so then he says, Van, go to there's a museum in Frankfurt. Go to the museum, film it, do all that. And
The Struppelpeter.
right. And so they did an improvisation based on Struwwelpeter.
Really?
In the rehearsals, which he never used for the performance, because he didn't, it wasn't quite finished. But it was kind of the mood-setting piece for the Welcome to the United States.
Right. Okay.
Improvisation.
Yeah. So the point is that Frank, that's conceptual continuity. Frank, for some reason, whatever reason, they bring it to Frank. Maybe Frank said, "Is there a dwarf?" You didn't know this, when dwarf, or you heard about it, and then you got someone to get it, and they're bringing it in, responding to him, or they somehow knew Frank's ideas and brought it.
Right.
but synchronicity. So he's got it. But the point is that it fits into his thing.
Right.
So so you agree. So that's really proof of my point that the dwarf thing is a very key motif, motif. All
Right.
through
Well,
his
and
work.
it continues through the PFIQ stuff.
Does it, Jerry? In what sense?
Well, the which is the PFIQ.
I've only seen it once, 2-3 years ago.
Well, anyhow, it's that's the stuff that's on.
That's what's the great composers. He goes and sees what's his name.
Well, no, this is the where they're reading from the it's not the tattoo, the piercing,
body piercing book.
Yeah, it's PFIQ, which is the magazine of the Gauntlet.
Of the what?
The Gauntlet.
Right,
down
right.
on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Right.
And so Herman, the piano player in the ensemble, is the one reading this into the piano.
Right. There's the piano.
Right.
Yeah.
And so these are some of the dialogues that show up in a little bit in Civilization.
Right.
And then a lot more in whatever this next album is, one of the unreleased albums. There's a number.
Can
of
you
these
dance
songs.
with me or
It's
the cover?
it's the PFIQ is the name of the cut, and then there's like 3 or 4 others.
What's the gee, the 93 when I was here, Jerry showed me the 2 things. What is the one where he goes and talks to Stockhausen?
Pifiaco.
That's PFIQ.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's this. And the tattooing is part of it. I now vaguely remember the tattooing, so that's part of it. Then there's the whole history. The A&E biography, The Late Show, is the other one, right?
Right.
Yeah. So which ends with Johnny, the tuba, the Tibetan guys, or
Right.
whatever they're called.
Tubas.
The Tubans.
Tubans.
Yeah.
Okay, so had you ever heard Frank? Jerry told me you got involved with Frank in the 70s, was it? The news show.
Two on the Town.
Two on the Town.
Right.
So you're with Frank almost 20 years. Did you ever hear him talk about the dwarf concept or anything? Never heard him?
Well, I have to, because I think in terms of things I've photographed with him.
Yeah. It was more like you take orders. He didn't tell you what his thinking was.
It depends. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff, as we're talking about the TV stuff, I mean, I photographed a lot of stuff that has never been exhibited. That was his television shows. I mean, that we did stuff with Thomas Nordig, and we did a whole panel discussion down in the basement.
What
with
television shows? You mean the ones he was
Well,
going
he-
to do?
these
These were
were-
his
yeah.
pilot projects,
Right.
and he
with
did some of them.
with the Christian guy
Right.
who defected from the evangelist.
Oh, there was.
This would be in 80
Oh,
when he
80s.
wanted to do. When did
This
that?
was in the early '80s.
Yeah, who's
Yeah.
the guy the black guy that took over from Frank? He just quit. He just got fired. This Fox guy that
Yeah.
replaced Frank.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. The big guy.
woof 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 woof.
Right.
Who's that guy?
Arsenio.
Arsenio.
They come and they go. We can't even
Right.
remember their names. So Arsenio, it was probably in '88 or '89 that Frank was going to, maybe let's say '89, he was going to have that show. And everybody freaked and said, no, Frank ain't going to do it. And then Arsenio admitted.
But that's just a
Arsenio
guess.
admitted.
Right.
That's just a guess. Vance.
No,
No,
basically-
Arsenio, when he interviews Frank on the show in '89, '90, he says, it's because of you, Frank, that I'm here.
But that was Frank being a substitute on Joan Rivers' show
Okay.
for a week or a day.
But
Van's talking
the
about
earlier-
things Frank actually
Right.
says, I'm just going to make a whole fucking bunch of
Right.
And he
TV
did that in the
shows.
early 80s.
Oh yeah. Since
Oh, he's been doing it his whole career,
Yeah.
basically.
In that sense, he-
filming everything,
Yeah, just absurd things that.
that he would use if he had to.
Right. That some of them would wind up in dub room or whatever, but there are a lot of stuff that just
That you did, of.
that is still sitting there.
But no dwarf concepts, obviously. In an obvious sense.
Give him time to think
Yeah,
about that, Bob. Let him
Get us
reflect
back on that in the next couple of
Right.
years.
Let
okay?
him reflect on what you said,
Because the
that's,
dwarf is so much of what it's
Right.
so, it fits in the whole thing. A ritual dance of
Okay,
the child
wonder.
killer, the first
Let me
ballet.
write that down. Dwarfs.
Write down ritual dance of the child killer,
Okay.
which is what Rumpelstiltskin did. He would hijack the firstborn, basically kill the first child. Ritual dance of the child killer equals Rumpelstiltskin equals the image of Frank on lumpy gravy. He's a little fucking dwarf,
yeah.
I remember when I first saw that album cover, I said, "There's something strange about this. Frank he's being a little guy. He's not being a big, like an absolutely free. He's just cosmic face with the spiral coming out of his eye, right?"
Well, it's
And here's
almost...
this little fucking idiot, you know, a little nothing on lumpy gravy.
Check this out. The guy, you know, Pete Chrislieb, the saxophonist, and I met him and his dad recently, and they're the only father-son team in my research that played with Frank.
Oh, really?
And they're both great horn players. And when I asked Pete about it, to recall it, he goes, it was the Lumpy Gravy sessions. Pete played on the Tonight Show for years, and he's played with Waits and all kinds of... He says, Frank was like a little office boy. He had a suit and tie on. He's directing. There's another. He's a little office boy.
Yeah,
Little
that
nerd.
is
Great. Like,
See, John says that Frank is a nerd, but the nerd exaggerated is Rumpelstiltskin.
yeah,
You know, yeah, he's a little jerk, the office manager almost, right?
yeah.
The guy paid to be the jerk running the show.
John said some really good things too about that normality thing.
Yeah, at the beginning. I think,
Yeah.
dude, I think Van missed that. I think Van came
Yeah,
came
it was right at the beginning,
You,
but
you
yeah,
came in right at the beginning,
yeah.
didn't he?
No, he came in pretty close to the
Yeah.
beginning. He caught most of it. Yeah, but it was very interesting because you were trying to say, well, no, Frank was normal. That was, I mean, that is a
He
key
was saying
theme.
that.
Yeah, and here's a shrink.
Yeah.
You know, so
Who was
who's
considered-
analyzed it. He knows. You know,
Frank's normal, but
you
the
know,
whole
like your
culture-
peers. Would your peers think he's
Yeah,
normal?
yeah.
No.
Yeah, so he was giving his personal opinion. We distinguish that later.
Right.
But that's the name of baby snakes. People who do things
just,
that are not normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was really good. In a way, John is the central scrutinizer. He's an AMA awarded psychiatrist, and so he's official analysis of who's sane and who isn't, right?
Yeah.
So we
Well,
begin with
that's interesting.
we
Yeah.
begin with the psychiatrist deciding is Frank normal or not,
Yeah.
and the psychiatrist privately Frank is
Oh,
very
yeah.
normal, but of course none of my associates would agree with that. So you get the conflicting of the job right there,
Right.
you know. So you see any others?
Well, oh,
Look how neat you write very neatly.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
the Welcome to the U.S., where you're talking about.
The immigration.
Yeah, I know where that came from because of the I-99 forms, which are the green forms, and all the ensemble guys had to sign those when they came.
And they
in.
reported the ridiculous experience.
Right.
That's how Frank found out
Right,
about it.
but he had never had. I mean, when you're traveling as an American, you never see it,
Yeah.
and so and they won't give you one if you ask for one, and they know you're an American. It was a big deal for Frank to get a hold of one, and I remember.
He couldn't. You mean once he found out, so he needed one for
right,
his art.
he had to have.
They wouldn't give him one.
Right.
It's a secret conspiracy
Right.
for the external.
No, it was, and I so when we flew to Frankfurt, for those rehearsals, coming back, I said, well, you know, they come through the aisles and here, and so they gave me the customs form because they know I was U.S. and I said, can I have a green one? And they said, well, no.
Even the steward, the
Right.
flight attendants
Yeah,
knew that.
they wouldn't give you one. But
Which is like it's a piece of paper. Why
Right,
not? I can take
right.
a souvenir.
anyhow, so that was
This interview is a great supplement to this. We got two back-to-back interviews here because he's filling in the missing points
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
John and I wouldn't know.
yeah. Anyhow, so and that became a huge issue because really, when you do read the thing, it's completely sinister. Form.
Yeah.
And you're completely right. If by signing it, you commit yourself to a position that can be very easily violated by the government.
Yeah.
And it's such a formality that, and it's one of those catch-22s. If you don't sign it, they can not admit you to the country. So I mean,
They got you.
yeah,
They got-
it's completely.
If Dean Latimer told me just last week in New York, this amazing little new legislation. Let me think how it goes. 2 months ago, the government passed a thing, and if someone who is a landed immigrant or is in here sort of legally, but is not an American citizen, when they leave the country to go somewheres, when they come back, there's a whole new legislation that if you have one black mark on your record, they won't let you back in. Do you know this legislation? So all the immigrants, or all the people in America who are here legitimately, and normally can go in and out, many, like Dean saying, many Cubans, they've been here 20 years, and a lot of them been busted for little dope things. They cannot leave the country now because they can't get back in. And so what do you think of that?
Yeah.
And so he was saying it's in the bureaucratic level, it's the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, having a power fight with the Customs Department, and INS won, and so the customs guys have to do this shit work and have these arguments at the border, like, they check the computer, which for these Cubans and whatever, never happened before. Oh, sorry, you were in jail 15 years ago, you can't go back in. Can you imagine this guy, he has a family there? That's an incredible new thing going on. So, I don't know what, they're trying to depopulate the states or something, and now a friend of mine, his boss runs a magazine distribution in Toronto, and he always goes to the annual magazine convention in Las Vegas or whatever. That's where it was this year. He comes to the border, and the guy says, "Oh, you got busted 15 years ago." And I don't know if it was in Canada or the States, but you're not allowed in. And yet he's just a Canadian trying to go to a business thing.
Yeah.
And so he caused a big stink in the media, and the Canadian media, of course, rallied. They love to hate the States, so they rallied behind this guy. And the issue seemed to come down that the immigration is pissed off at Canada for still trading with Cuba since the plane went down.
Sure.
So they're getting real mean at the border, you know, and Americans wouldn't know this.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I mean, the white Americans, the guys who came here, they don't have this problem of getting in and out.
Right.
As well, and this is another part of it.
Yeah, and it was parodied in that.
Yeah, that piece.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyhow, let's see. There was only one other. It was something that you were talking about that I was, again, there. Oh, Phase 3. Because I know there are 4 versions.
Oh, when John had the pre-version.
Right. But there were 4 versions, because I knew that at the time Dave and Spence were very concerned because there kept being new versions.
At what time? 80, 89?
Right. Well, this was just before he died.
They were concerned about
being 4 versions of Phase 3, and because he kept changing it.
Okay, well they're saying to Frank, well, which one you want?
Right.
That kind of issue, and he told them which one.
Well, and because sometimes it was very difficult for them to know which
one to fine tune.
Right, which was different, and it made me think because just from having edited on the AFNRA, that how much he enjoyed the physical process of editing.
Yeah.
No matter what it was. And to me, that was always very much a large part of why he kept revising things.
That's what I was saying. The sensory act itself was its own yoga or enjoyment, right? The content was irrelevant.
Right.
Yeah, so that's
proof. And that became, and then for them, a kind of a big issue because...
Look, Frank, we can do this forever, but we actually got to put something out.
Right.
And
Exactly.
don't you think you might know how to say something in one?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's where Frank's fantasy world, his utopian world of perpetual motion, do what he wants, has to interact with the other.
Right.
You know, and they represent the other world, the other. Well, that's amazing. So there's 4 versions, but the versions are irrelevant. You know what I mean, in terms of understanding what Frank was. But Frank every now and then did seem to have a message. But I think the dwarf metaphor is the message, and the King Kong. You have the little and the big, and see, this is the funny thing is that. It really is McLuhan-esque because he always said that the mechanical technologies of the 19th century that Orwell said would lead to this incredible mechanical takeover of the world, the 1984 vision. Marshall's insight was the electric world decentralized things. So that the idea of this Leviathan that would dominate everybody, this beast, was not appropriate to people's experience in the 70s, 80s when we were actually getting electric autonomy and community breakdown. Anybody could do what they wanted to. So Big Brother didn't control your private life on a certain level. So that's electric decentralization. So if you think of Leviathan as the King Kong, and just as the King Kong, McLuhan said, people who are saying that the beast is coming and projecting this 19th century big thing on the electric environment are missing the point. We have a more subtle Big Brother phenomenon because it's allowing us to decentralize. And he said, Big Brother goes inside him, becomes invisible, and is a secret government guy going around snuffing people privately. No one knows why they got killed. It's like the Wild Palm scenario, or this thing, the Drive Time movie. But so Big Brother becomes the electric doll, hidden in a Volkswagen bus and a Chicken Delight. You see, that's they can run the world with tininess, with hit teams. All right. So King Kong is the big monster, traditional 19th century, going to kill us all, and the little people are the little people, and they're getting beat up by the thing. But under TV electric conditions, satellite conditions, King Kong becomes a friendly guy, if you understand, and the little invisible guy is the new tyrant.
It's a danger.
So Frank was so McLuhan-esque and so accurate, playing with the reversed images. It's like the slang of of the blacks. They say if it's a good song, they go, "Oh, that's bad. That's bad." They're playing with the opposite, the white man's opposites. You know. Well, Frank did that with his iconic imagery. So we all know King Kong was a major theme, but the dwarf is the other thing. And John didn't know that thing about the time. That's the one thing that's in Time magazine, which is if we have history in the year 2000 and 200 years, Big Brother is Time magazine. Frank got the key concept in Time magazine. If that's all he's going to be remembered for in the Universal Archive, it's right in there. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So I think I've come up with the paradigm that explains the conceptual brilliance of Frank. And what I'm doing, I'm raising Frank's stock because I'm saying he had it together in terms of the larger knowledge that McLuhan and them had. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good one.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
But do you think that he would have embroiled all this in such a subtle way that it would take all the interviews and all the thinking and all the piecing together and all the puzzling for
That I
somebody-
did.
Yeah, that you did to
I
come
think
up
he did
with
because when you figure it out, I mean, luckily I was McLuhan's archivist, so I know not many people know this McLuhan point, but because I knew it, I figured it out. And then once it figured out, Scott, then I realized it's the same fucking theme in all the albums. I mean, it's not just that. There's other variations and jerking off stuff and long and smothers and all the other variations. But in some kind of conceptual, the brain does have on the big level as a map it works with. That's sort of guiding it behind the scenes. Like in biology, they say the parts of the plant can't do their biological organism function unless they know what the big plant is doing. So as humans, we always have a big picture as a background while we do our daily little micro details, right? So I'm saying the King Kong and the thing is the big framework, and the millions of albums are variations and detailed spin-offs, Baroque spirals, but the big framework that Frank was working with was consistent. And I think that he did have that because it's all through the thing, like he did Stumpo Peter. See, that's an amazing new fact. He tells you to go get that. We got to get that from the museum.
Yeah, no,
He knew.
Yeah.
He did. It's like Frank could do details and he could fuck around, but every now and then someone would come up with some neat story, some anecdote, folk culture. Oh, that fits into the big picture.
Right.
Get that. It's obvious.
This is the PFIQ stuff because that's the sort of twisting and turning. Because in the particular quote that Herman is reading, it's about this guy that has his penis cut in half.
Ooh, yeah.
So it's literally like split down the middle,
and that's in a children's story.
No, this is the
Gauntlet sort of
body
the
piercing
tattooing
magazine.
Thing. Yeah, okay. This is modern American perversity.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and in fact, the whole thing is because what is it? It's called Research.
Yes, Research.
Research. Their issue on tattooing.
Oh, Research. I know that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, their issue on tattooing. I picked it up downtown and I'm like reading through it and I go, oh my God, it has these pictures in it. This guy's dick.
Genesis Peoria.
Right.
Psychic TV.
Yeah. So I take it to Frank but I hadn't made because I was only reacting to the picture. So I take it to him. I say, God, you look at this guy, and he opens it up and he goes, oh, this is the guy that Herman's talking about in PFIQ. And PFIQ is a letter. Herman's reading a letter to the magazine,
which
they quote in the magazine.
The subculture of that Research is iconizing.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is from this guy talking about his operation.
Oh, about how he did it.
Right. And I don't realize that the picture I'm reacting to is of the guy
that is in the piece.
In the letter.
That's in the piece.
Right. So I'm
and
providing.
Frank points this out.
Yeah. He's going, oh, this is perfect.
Well,
so then every time I went to the house for the next year, the magazine was sitting there, and Research
would be there.
Right.
Search.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
but it's the it's like the dwarf. I mean, it's the you're taking a normal person or whatever.
You're killing your child, which is your fucking dick.
Right.
You're putting it in two tableaus,
right.
So to speak, splitting it up.
So,
I was gonna.
I think that's connected with this.
Right now, Frank. He sees Research. He sees this guy, and he goes, Why does Frank know that's what Herman's?
Well, because of his memory.
Right.
The name.
He recognized the name. You didn't.
Was like this.
Right. So it was a discovery for him, but he just had a bigger connection than you did.
Right.
Yeah.
So then we had to shoot all the pictures.
So
That
so
never made it in the
that's
show.
the penis dimension. You see, he knew. You see, it was just the way Finnegan's Wake was written. Joyce he had his framework, and new information would come at him in Paris, and he could always fit it in. So these guys would run out, his workers, and they bring in a bunch of stuff from the encyclopedias and he'd go, no, that doesn't fit. That one does that one, and they didn't know what the hell he was judging it by. But you can look at Frank was taking things that fits, that doesn't. And this thing fit into what the penis dimension and all that. Because there's an amazing quote of Frank in one of those documentaries where he says, "You ever seen any two people fucking?" He says it's ugly, it's awful, it's something he didn't like to look up. Now, in the '60s, Frank was the image of sexual revolution where everybody's having orgies. Now, you didn't think that Frank would be self-conscious. You might have thought that Frank was part of these orgies, even though as you got to know him, he may not have been. But the thing is that if Frank is part of a sexual revolution that's advocating orgies, like Ginsberg and Leary and all this stuff, then you'd think the people would want to have orgies and enjoy watching someone else fuck. What's amazing, at the end of his career, Frank says, I hate looking at anybody else fuck. So he's actually a very private person and wouldn't engage in an orgy. That's how I take it from that. Do you ever think of that quote? Or am I misinterpreting it?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. But, you know, I know when Matza Morgan went up to the house, they played videos of Long Dong Silver,
Right. Yeah.
you know, for
Some
people.
porno stuff?
Yeah.
It was the porno star that Clarence Thomas brought
Right.
up,
Right.
Oh, okay.
who's got a dick
but
like
that's
this
footage.
long. Right,
That's footage.
as a
In
satirical.
the biological level, if
Right.
Frank represents this communal thing, hippie reality, where they all want to fuck together, he says at the end of his career, I couldn't stand being in an orgy. It looks ugly.
Right,
You know,
right.
He says, what more absurd
No, I
thing than
think
watching?
you're
He
accurate,
called
yeah.
it the absurdity of fucking. You know what I mean?
Right.
Watching two people. So don't you think that's contrary to the image people had in the '60s of him being part of somehow that? I mean, Pat Buchanan accused him on Crossfire. He says, "You started the sexual revolution."
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what he accused him
Oh,
of.
yeah.
You know? Your
'cause
sexual
he-
revolution.
You know, because he had all those lines, all strap-on groupies and the.
Well, it was in the
yeah.
imagery,
Right.
And Frank did do that,
Right.
but it was always private.
Right.
He'd never do what the image on Uncle Meat in the booklet, where all the guys are sitting in the bed together with this little doll. You know what I mean?
Right.
Gangbang doll or whatever orgiastic image you get from it. And then you think of it, Frank. He said in the '80s, he started saying, I'm a conservative. Now, a conservative is sexually private, or in some ways would be sexually discreet. You know, and if he really was discreet, and we never knew until he said that quote, we never knew. Frank was never on record till that point what Frank thought of orgies or how he reacted to seeing someone else fuck, which he would see on the road a lot, right? And and people thought he was absurd, or thought he was lying or silly, saying he was a conservative, and they might have said, well, yeah, he's conservative in the sense of the government, but Frank was actually conservative in his personal experience of life and his own sense of privacy. You know what I mean? So
Well, what about the comment about that John brought up on narcotics? Because people are talking about it on the internet, but I always think that at the end of Frank's life, that all the drugs that were in his body were definitely affecting his his creative decision.
No, they're bad news. Could you say? I mean, a guy like Dave Wally says Frank was antisocial, and to a criminal degree in a sense. He just didn't know how to relate to people, and he just workaholic. He worked on himself. Worked with him, jerked off, masturbated with his machines. Now, you knew him in his last year, and then Wally would say that Frank finally, his karma caught up to him, and he said, geez, I better be a friendly guy for a little while. So he had these social things.
Right.
What would you, who knew him, how would you comment on that Wally perception?
Well, your setup, I think I agree with that. I mean, he was worked all the time.
Yeah.
And
that's the nerdy part.
Right.
He's the guy in the lab all the time.
And the practical part of that is his schedule was always off any other schedule.
Yeah, he was on the night shift. Yeah.
Right. And
on
so
purpose, because he knew he could get work done.
Right. And that limit, I mean, that's to the work, and so otherwise you can't get much done. But I never got a sense that it was just to spite anyone else.
Right.
It was just down the
His
line.
sense of mission. He
Right.
had a sense of mission. He was a great artist
Right.
in that sense.
But
And he was a nice person when you're with
Yeah.
him. But he
Yeah,
never
he's
went
good.
out to parties or
No.
he never went groupie, group
no,
oriented.
I mean, I had, I think, well, not counting being on the road, I had dinner with him twice outside the house. And,
Yeah.
they were very nice evenings and with a few people. not just my wife came along, and there was
Frank had social skills, is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
yeah,
He could be bourgeois and just be nice.
Yeah. and and it was great. But the salon thing developing it is actually pretty well documented in the radio documentary with Dave.
Music
Spence.
makers, yeah.
Music makers, because it really was part of him just slowing down.
Now, is that due to the drugs? Is
Well,
Jerry's point?
The illness.
Illness.
I think just initially the illness, and the early treatments were some very strange homeopathic stuff, and would have no idea what that was doing to him.
And that's in 91, you mean?
Yeah, but just the physical energy. This was a part of that because the idea of having it, because Dave was always completely surprised because when we're in Russia, Frank would occasionally take some bourbon. We bought
Oh, really?
we bought some scotch. Excuse me, Johnny Walker Red, and because he at that time wasn't sure, but was clearly, now I could see he was already obviously suffering from the illness already.
Yeah.
And in fact had to go from Paris, or went from Paris to New York and left New York early because he was starting to feel pretty sick by then. But it was a crossroads of the illness and just having to not being able to work so much.
Right.
And so a Friday afternoon, it was a very sort of just the thing to do,
Right, so
TGIF
it's not a change. You can't say he had this karmic thing that Wally's saying. It's just the circumstances where he had to slow down. So he had time to kill. So he would talk to people, which actually shows he is a social person.
Right.
Once he knew the mission had finished, well, just sit around and talk like everybody else, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right, and then it took on a real vaudevillian sort. Because
then it actually turned into something interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And the transition from being a impromptu thing, a very
to
informal
becoming a
thing
ritual
at the house, to a ritual, was fairly subtle. But by the time the last time I was there, it was people were coming specifically for that.
It was Zappa's night school.
Right.
It's kind of like night school in a relaxed way, right? Come and see what's going to happen.
But and even Rip,
Renz?
he did a thing in the Weekly.
Yeah, I read
that.
Back. And it was weird because I
Was
was
that an pretty active?
Yeah, I was at every one of those, which surprised me because I thought I hadn't gone to that many.
You read every one that he refers to,
talked
and you
about.
saw that guy from Japan, that weird, whoever he was.
Schrader's brother.
Paul Schrader?
Paul
Yeah,
Schrader's
Leonard.
brother, Leonard Schrader. Yeah, that was
Well,
very weird.
Renzi regretted that he hadn't taped it, that conversation.
Oh, right.
If you got a good kind of memory in that level, and just start going, not now, but you might want to go on record to say what you remember, some of the concepts that went on.
Yeah, because he didn't go into, before that was a huge long discussion the two of them had about the Mongols.
Right.
And Frank had seen a documentary about the invasion of the Mongols and then later the Turks, but basically anti-Western forces invading the West, and Schrader had done a bunch of research, and so
They had similar interests, coincidentally.
and went on to great length, and then
they get into this other level.
yeah, and that took Schrader to this about what's Mishima's wife. That's who it was.
You mean in his research, that's how he connected?
Well, then there was
the topic shifted.
Well, yeah, because Schrader lived in Japan for
Yeah.
a long time, and they're talking about the East, and just general weirdness of the Mongols. And then, as I remember, a little bit later, he brought up this.
He knew Mishima?
Well, it was his wife who was mentioned in the story of this woman.
Schrader's wife?
No, yeah, no, it was Mishima.
His wife.
Mishima's wife.
His wife was the woman that crawled across the floor and.
That Schrader
Yeah.
was talking about.
Yeah.
I don't remember that particular, but that's
Yeah.
what you mean.
Yeah.
And so it just went
It was
into another topic,
Yeah.
another thing. But here's the question, though.
It was bizarre.
So, John is saying that Frank, he comes up with a different ending because he has changed on the drugs. That's mistaken because there's 4 versions, and we can't say that Frank's thinking has changed even though his lifestyle changes.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's where that's a little off. John has inadequate information.
Right. No, I think in even from the Bob Stone years, it was like, you know, what gets fixed and what doesn't get fixed. I mean, it's just, you know, there's
utilitarian, whatever. It just whatever could be done.
right.
Okay, so, but the thing is that Frank, his thinking was, well, he was working on the opera. He was still going to do what he was going to do if he lived, right? He wasn't mutated into another guy thinking totally differently, you know,
No.
stoned on the medication.
No, I mean, that may have been the case during some of the Perez stuff, which was
Just before he
Yeah.
died. So you mean he
Right.
might, that's where he might go.
well, there it was clear that, you know, he was in extreme pain, but also he had to have the pain medication just.
So it was altering his creative process.
Well, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, well,
but it was lucky he was doing Perez, which
Right.
was just Perez.
but
you know?
No,
I
but
don't separate
you can't.
the physical, the endurance, because I did see instances where he just, because of he was completely inspired by some of the improvisational
Yeah.
opportunities, that even having the ensemble there to perform the Perez, and to the way they were staged and the way they had to rehearse in difficult or non-traditional conditions, that Frank was still able to use them in improvisational ways.
Yeah, he was still thinking
Right.
musically how to
Right.
do it.
Right. And so there were instances during
So what are you
those-
not separating?
Yeah,
You said-
physical.
Right. Well, I don't separate the cancer from any treatment of. I mean, there was only so much energy he had left,
Right.
and whatever it took with the pain medication or whatever, I never saw any diminishment of his focus when he had the energy.
When he
on
had the
mu-
energy,
on the music.
but maybe he had less time to be
Yeah,
focused.
Right.
Yeah, so he's still Frank's mind was still going if it had the
Yeah,
rest.
I never saw much difference.
Right.
In the whole, because, you know.
That's what Gail says the day he died. You know, last days, Beverly D'Angelo say he was very clear right up to the day, and remarkable considering he's supposed to be deteriorating.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I just because I could deal with his energy in the improvisations and stuff, and I'd seen it many times before.
I mean, you not can deal with it. You could recognize the energy was there
Right.
when he was on a roll and
Right.
doing it.
Right.
Well, let me ask one thing though. Frank drank. He dealt with pain throughout his whole life because he had tooth pain, and Nigel Lennon will tell you how Frank used to gargle like whiskey. And when she first met him, he's like gargling whiskey, and she's going, "This guy's a fucking wine, drunk," you know. And then she realized that it was dealing with his tooth pain because he had fucked up teeth most of his life.
I mean,
Or
it was
he
beyond
had dental
dentistry?
problems.
That's a dental hygiene dilemma.
Dental hygiene
Yeah,
dilemma.
well, and
So-
also his fear of the knife.
The original.
Right, okay.
The
fear
knife
of
you mean from when he was a kid?
Well,
No.
just of knife. Well, the
fear of
getting
dentists.
operated.
Oh, he had
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Ben Watson goes into. That's the thing. They fucking stuck the stuff up his nose when he was 5 years old. And so he had an embedded, imprinted thing of fear of idiots in doctors' offices.
Right.
Dental, yeah.
So, did you said you were drinking the Johnny Walker? Was that with Frank? Now the question is, I know one person who told me that Frank told her, Laura Fishman, about an incident where he got drunk with some record executives once. Now, did you ever party with Frank to the point where he was like drunk? Not so much. Like the guy never really got in that. He never got into that, did he?
No,
He
no.
got-
There was, some rare social drinking, like in Moscow and stuff. But
He never got drunk.
no, I never saw.
Yeah, so yeah.
Did he even say he was generally not a drinker? Didn't drink beer, but he drank wine, or what was it?
Right, he says he has a wine cellar and he'll drink wine, but he.
But you
I-
saw him drink other things
Yeah,
occasionally.
yeah, but it was nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
there were times I was drunk and he wasn't.
You're rolling around. Oh, I love Moscow. I want to stay. Frank's going, come on, we got to get out of here. You're there. Frank, that satellite's going to be great. Can I direct the satellite, Frank?
Yeah, he was.
We'll take over, Frank.
You're right.
Yeah, well, I like to see the video that Frank takes the camera and he fills Van flopping around the streets of Moscow. We'll have to see that footage. So,
Can I ask a question?
How did you get to work with Frank?
Well, when I was doing this 2 on the Town show.
In the 70s.
This was
Yeah.
79, I think. 78, possibly. But I was a fan. So I said, hey, we got to do Frank. I mean, he lives here and all this stuff. And they said, fine. And so a producer at the time had made the initial contact, and we went to the house, and he wanted to meet me and the producer Nick, and
He wanted to meet you just as a formality, not that he knew about you.
right,
Yeah.
just to say, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
How are you going to do it? And stuff.
How are you going to rip me out? What are you guys going
Right.
to do? Yeah.
And so we went, and then he, so while we were there taping, he of course had one of the part of the deal was he got the tapes after we were.
Yeah, he always said that, and always you got to give him a copy.
And CBS agreed. What is that?
No,
CBS?
yeah, it was CBS, but they just gave, because when you were finished with those shows, they would just erase the tapes.
But he made sure
Yeah,
that they.
but you got an okay from your upper executive?
Well, yeah, I mean they,
Probably wouldn't do it unless you did that.
basically it's just like, okay, you don't take the tapes to get them erased, you just put them over here and then that over here.
But you didn't get permission. You just did it.
No,
right.
you don't have.
Right.
You just did things.
You just did it. Yeah.
Anyhow, so.
But Frank made sure you did it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And anyhow, so he clearly had watched what I'd done, and was happy about it. I mean, so he.
When he got the tapes, that's when he.
Yeah, and then it was clear after
So
that.
you made the sacrifice. You went anti-corporate and smuggled things. So you're a good guy, and then he likes your work. So you actually passed the test. So he
Right.
then invited you to do more
He
stuff.
said, write your number up on the wall in the studio, and so I did, and he called me.
But
Write your
do you know
number.
what it was about your work that he's
Well-
singled you out?
No, actually, I really still don't. And one of the things you're talking about is the other.
Just one detail. What do you mean? Who wrote the number up on the wall?
Me. He said, write my phone number up.
His
on
number. So you wrote it on the wall?
I wrote my number up on the old before they fixed.
Oh,
the,
in his house. He said,
yeah.
put that there. So you
Yeah.
just had it there. And
In
he
his
called
house.
you a few weeks later?
I was a while later, and
Yeah.
of course he called himself personally, and then
At home.
yeah, and I oh.
No pre-answer machines or
Just
you
hi,
picked it up.
this
So
is
this
Frank.
is Frank.
Can you come over? and from then on, I just would go over and photograph stuff for him, film stuff.
Right. So that'd be 1980, and that was when he was building his new studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it you're going to look up?
Oh, well, because at one point you were talking about,
See, we're having the correct. This is the addendum to the dialogue.
build structures. I wrote it down because I knew I'd forget.
The figure ground.
No.
Listen, I get a fart. I'm just going over here and fart. Remember what we said about structures, Jerry?
Yeah.
He's looking for something that I don't remember that.
I gotta get my notes.
Yeah, what-
Structures.
Oh, here it is. It was right after satellites. It was music. You were talking about. Well, anyhow, one time we were in the studio, and this is in what did he see in my? Why did he like what I did?
Right.
Because he said, well, we were talking about a piece of music. He had just played a piece of music for me, which I don't remember which. It was stuff that became Phase 3, because this was in like 1990. And
He played you the music.
he was playing a very abstract selection. And we're talking about the music, and I said, well, I don't see how this relates to that. And he says, well, how can you say that? Because in your work, in my work, your compositional elements, you relate all these structures in a very musical way. And I said, well, I don't see that at all. I mean, I don't see, what I didn't see was the, as you put it, well, as I put it, there are architectural compositions, musical or spatial or graphical. I mean, that there are blocks and modules and things that go together musically. I just wasn't translating into the music. I was only looking at it
Right.
through the frame just as a compositional thing, that certain things fit here, certain things fit
More
there.
visual,
Right.
and he's ear.
Right.
So he looks at your stuff as an ear person, and he sees, oh, this guy has a great musical sense.
Right.
And then when you try to judge his ear music, you can't. What do you mean? I'm following your technique.
Right.
He says to you.
Right.
That's fine. And so, but that's how you found out what he thought of your
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. That I mean and of course then he taught me that a way
After that point.
yeah, a way to approach his music was in terms of how I see the world.
Yeah. In other words, he said, okay, I see this in your style, and I'm going to tell you how. What I see, and you're doing unconsciously, I'm going to make you conscious of what you're doing, and that's what I'm saying. What I'm doing.
The way the piece of the music worked was in a compositional way that I would see visually, and it just took time.
It made sense. He translated you back to yourself through him. It
Right.
worked. So
And-
can you say what that is, or
Uh,
like what is it that you couldn't see?
Well, it's more the it's a relationship between the tempo of a piece and the well, it would be a multi-dimensional analysis of a piece of music. I mean, because I never would think music in terms of layers, and he was always very careful about describing front to back and side stereophonically,
Yeah.
and in placement of the orchestra. And so it was from that that was the first time I could sit down and then listen to a piece of
With
music
that in mind.
and say, okay, well, there is a sound field here that's a dimensional field, not necessarily three-dimensional. It can be multi-dimensional, but
Right.
but you can look at that as a piece, and you can slice a frame out of that, and in that frame can exist all the values that I would find in a
Yeah.
photograph.
That's. I think you think of the Pauline Oliveri thing. The unconscious and the overconscious, two invisible sound sources create this undifferentiated tissue in the middle. Is that the section that you're referring
Well,
to?
it was just right after you're talking about the satellites and stuff. And, I don't have the.
Okay, here's the thing: is that what you're describing is only rarely would Frank talk about that. He would describe in Huntington or one of those things that it was set up that you could walk around in his opera and hear different things in different areas. And he was very aware of building acoustic space. And he was fascinated with what he called the G phenomenon, the unheard after image of the sound. Remember, you ever heard him talk about the thing you couldn't? You remember that, Jerry? The after image. When he would be working with the computer, there was some kind of residue that was left after the note disappeared, and he talks about that. He says, I love those silent.
Oh, the dust.
The dust. That's what it is. Yeah. Tell us something. I mean, there's a quote in here that I'm referring to.
Well, that was a big deal about.
Is this the multidimensionality? Is
well,
that a factor?
It's the about phase 3 was that
The crop dusting. There's the pun.
It's a collection of dust.
Yeah, which is Did you see him ever hear him talk about modern physics? Because he's always quoting modern. Every now and then, new Masons. He would talk. And dust, I think, is when you're doing a cyclotron, you're looking at dust. So, did you ever talk about it in terms of modern science?
Well, in P. Fiatco, and it's something I should give you a copy because I have a complete transcript of all the interviews we did for P. Fiatco.
Which we only get glimpses
amazing
of.
book. No,
Yeah.
I've got a couple Xeroxes of a couple of the
okay.
pages.
Of everything? You got everything?
No, the whole book is so dense. You don't. I mean, God, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's this thick, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It has
interesting.
the full.
For him to read it would
Yeah.
be great, but I've actually I Xeroxed a couple good pages, which we always talk about, is the Beyond the Love.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
but
not
that's
worried
just
about what love is. I'm beyond.
I operate with love as a
love.
given. I'm not trying to find love or have love. It's already there. Is
Yeah.
Frank's thing, which was interesting. But you may not. But you never noticed the physics stuff. I'd be interested in the physics stuff. Did they get into that? Who interviewed him on that? Who-
Henning Lohner, the director of P. Fiatco.
He was actually
We'll
he
watch
was
it
aware of
again.
that stuff.
Well, just through, I mean,
His question
His
brought that out in
question,
Frank.
right.
He didn't know Frank was going to do that.
no, because Henning was a student of worked for
Yeah, right.
Stockhausen.
And Stockhausen was working with modern physics concepts.
Well, it placed them in the right area. I mean,
Placed who? Stockhausen?
Well, the conversation.
Right.
I mean, you know that.
And Frank probably took it in areas that Stockhausen didn't.
Right.
But Stockhausen was dealing with modern science in some way. He's talking about Sirius and outer space stuff.
Right. Have you heard about his last Stockhausen? Somebody was just talking to me about this helicopter thing he did.
No?
He had the ensemble was, each one of them was in a different helicopter.
Oh.
And the performance occurred as all the helicopters were in the air, and they were just playing.
You couldn't hear him.
Right.
And you were down on the ground
Yeah,
watching
but
these,
they
floating.
mic'd everybody, so
You
the-
couldn't
Be
hear
on
him enough.
tape.
It was
The
all
audio-
collected at one point.
yeah.
What'd you say?
So he
It
that guy
was-
must.
It was all collected at one point.
He must
tape,
have
the music.
huge
Yeah,
But see,
from
here's,
the different helicopters.
but see that, what'd you say?
He must get huge budget.
Yeah.
The-
Brings the military. It's like Hollywood. Bring the military in. But that's an important. Have you read my interview with the dead Frank? Do you know that I interviewed the dead Frank?
Just from what just the parts you were talking.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested in your
Yeah.
feedback because he talks about the McLuhan. The point here's Stockhausen. You know, we sit in our bodies and watch the helicopters. We're in one medium, our own bodies, but it's being taped, and I'm assuming then he creates another piece that you can hear in a different medium, which is the record or whatever
Right.
acoustic thing. So the concept is going through different media, and it mutates. And I'm sure that's what Frank was working with. You know.
Well, unfortunately, I can't think of all the things, but I'll make a copy of it because it's a very large. It's
Right.
a thick book, but
I'll take it.
there's a number of passages in there that are.
Which I'd be interested.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, so what can you say now though about the dust concepts?
Well,
See, that's the idea. Everything's disappeared, and we've got dust. See, that's my idea. I did this lecture panel at Midnight Express, and I was telling the people that humans disappeared 50, 100 years ago. Then the machines took over, and they're the actors inside the global theater. Now the machines then evaporated themselves. By after '77 in the '80s, they became angels. Then the angels disappeared in 1990. So advertising is the view of the angels looking back, celebrating when they are angels and when they were machines, and they're looking back at it cynically. Now, that means if everything's disappeared, we got dust. And that's what physics
Right.
does. They just study dark matter,
Right.
non-matter.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I always thought Frank knew that's what he knew
Yeah.
music was dead. And so he was writing non-music, and he emphasized the dust, the non-hearable stuff.
right. Oh yeah.
Did he talk to you about that in any way?
Yeah. And
And that must be the multidimensionality stuff.
in.
It'd have to be, right?
Um,
Stephen Hawking. That's why he goes into Stephen Hawking.
well, Dondorf
yeah.
always follows that stuff too.
Oh, really? I should have a talk with him sometime.
And when Dave and I are having a conversation, more often than not, what was the last thing we talked? The last little physical thing. Well, anyhow.
I mean, Dave brings this up. He makes you think about it.
It's always right there with Dave. So I know just over the years that
How to
Dave
do
and
it.
Frank would have these
So
conversations.
Dave is the guy who has the details
because
in this.
Dave would have is somebody that just really pays attention to that. But also just that Frank would have just from Heisenberg and whatever just
Yeah.
known about that
John-
something's sitting there and you're going to change
Right.
even.
John said that people didn't think Frank read. He read, and I guess you saw evidence of that.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was aware of intellectual
Well, he'd
magazines.
always say I heard him say he'd never read a book, but then he would go on at length about Webern and
He would get glimpses of them. He'd get them in a magazine article. He was aware of their ideas regardless of how he found it. He may
Right.
not have read their whole book, but he was aware of their stuff and he thought about their ideas,
Oh, yeah.
didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were saying about, I don't know if I cut you off, Dondorf would talk about...
Well,
this
anyhow,
and
about state of the art physics stuff. Plus, I mean, certainly in the salon days, there was a large number of different people coming through.
who brought those points up?
And
Or did Frank make them aware that he was thinking that level and they could respond?
I know it was the interview for the guitar magazine.
Yeah, that
issue.
Don Men.
that
Right,
special.
Don Men.
Done, man.
Because we recorded those interviews.
Did you
on tape,
really?
Yeah. And in that interview, he talks about dust.
Right. That, like when I read the excerpt, it might even be that's what he's quoting from. That's where we first hear about it.
Yeah.
But that's Frank's view. That's Frank.
Right.
Don Men probably wasn't able
No.
to carry it
No,
on.
no.
But Dave Dondorf was
Yeah.
ongoing in dealing with it,
Yeah.
and you picked up a bit of it.
Oh yeah.
So what is an idea? I mean, I know you can't remember the conversation, but what's an idea that that sticks in your mind like an after image in physics or something that you think of in terms of Frank, or you remember him saying? And also Hawking. You must have talked about Hawking since he dedicated his book to him.
You know,
maybe this will trigger you off. This is why he always says Uncle Meat was an evil scientist. You see, McLuhan said that art tends, and I bring this up in the '88 interview, art tends to go towards science, and science tends to go as art. They cross the identity crisis and they switch games. So Frank somehow intuited that in his music, and he was not a musician, he was a scientist. And that's why he kept up with physics concepts. You see the Meson concept, which is a physics particle of the 60s, is in the booklet of Uncle Meat. And then he says on Civilization Phase 3, he interjects, new Masons have halos. Remember, the halos are of the, there it is. So he was doing it.
Well, even from his original obsession with Perez.
Right, which would be science.
Right,
yeah.
and science fiction. I mean, just in the associating the way the guy looked on the poster or the album cover.
Right, the evil scientist.
With some strange sci-fi picture.
Right.
I mean,
Actually, that is in the Bob Marshall. That's in the '88 interview. I actually tried to say, no, what is it about what the scientist aspect of it? Yeah, and that's in that. But I was interested in how, in the end, he was a musician and how he was trying to make the physics concepts become music.
Yeah.
And it's the multidimensionality thing I think you're talking about.
Oh, well, yeah, but also in the interview, of course, because in this interviews for P. Fiatco, we talked with Xenakis in Paris.
Yeah.
And the two of them at that point got very technical about
Frank and Xenakis?
Yeah, because Frank was really taken by Xenakis. He was extremely impressed.
So, I mean, like after it's the first time he met him, right?
Yeah.
And they start talking. And Frank says, oh, I got a big one on the line here. So he says, I'm going to go into some real personal concerns. And then they went into it. And you got the transcript of that?
Yeah.
Ooh. And many people have this?
No. No, I think it's like 6 copies.
That's fantastic.
6 real copies.
That's what we've been looking for. Hey, we found the CIA guys who got the document.
Well,
yeah,
here's the one thing I was just going to show you if you wanted to read it. This is I don't know if you have this, Van, but we'll make you a copy. This is Bob's interview that he did with Frank
as Bob Marshall.
In October 21 of '88.
This is what I keep
It's a
referring to.
72-page booklet.
Cool.
Have you ever seen this?
No.
Well, we'll make a copy, but if you wanted to read that little part where when you bring up Paulina Rivera,
okay.
And then that point.
Oh, yeah.
It's just more, but
any person, smart person reads this. This is the idea. This was an idea that blew Wally away, and different people. It's really Frank showing his mind. I go, where I get the idea part is, I remember you did an interview in the LA Free Press in the summer '69, and you mentioned Pauline Oliveri's work with sound. Above the audible and below, creating a mass, and you liked that idea. Then he goes, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a sum indifference tone which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yielded something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you like what you hear in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant. He means Oliveri's concept. Yeah, because it showed you how physical reality is, or the way it is, right? It's one aspect of it. Are there other aspects you could talk about? If you buy the idea that the vibrational rates translate into matter, and then if you understand the concept of vibrational rates above perception and below perception combining to create a reality, that opens up the door to some pretty science fiction matter possibilities. If you can create an audible reality by a sine wave above the range of what your ear can hear, and another one from below, and you put them together and suddenly it creates something that your ear can detect, is it not possible that solid matter of an unknown origin could manifest periodically because of frequencies of some unknown nature above and below, which for short durations manifest solid objects? It could explain a lot of strange things that people see. I'm thinking now he does touch on this in the Don Men film. And I go, UFOs come to mind immediately. And Frank says, yeah. And
so anyways,
that's about it. Isn't that an interesting thing?
Yeah. I never heard that.
Oh, there's lots in that.
Wow.
That interview is the.
That's why it's the greatest interview. Wally is going to, Dave Wally's redoing the book, and he said this interview is the great one, the only one that was really got Frank out of himself and communicated. But as you can see, I want more information on this point. And
Yeah.
you've got it, about he says science fiction matter possibilities. And it's a great interpretation of UFOs,
Did he ever attempt an experiment to work with these frequencies?
Well, that's what his concept constantly
Supersonic
was
and
since Lumpy Gravy. That's why, this is the thing about Lumpy
Did
Gravy.
Did he ever
What'd you
attempt to produce?
I gotta get going.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't realize.
Yeah, it got late.
Yeah, we fooled
Dan,
them.
we really
we put a
appreciate
drug
it.
in your drink and you didn't know. You've
You've
been away for 3 years.
Van, I wanted to give you a couple things before you leave. Here's the Nigel Lennon date, so just stay in touch if you can.
great.
In any time from now until August 10th, if you want to do any filming.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, that's
tomorrow.
right. No, that's all right. August 10th, we're going to do a gig down the street, and you can come and shoot some of
Okay.
that if you want. Here's Bob's 2 recent articles. Up the Orphic Annie, there's a lot of Frank references in that. And then Solar Theater.
That's where I really developed.
And then here is Bob's Bob Marshall channeling Frank. But keep in mind, it works a lot better when you read that, because that was done when he was alive. This is done after.
It's part 2.
So it's just stuff to have fun with,
Great.
and just stay in touch.
Well, and I really, Jerry gave me the from Flipside of the
Finnegan's Way.
Finnegan's
Yeah,
Way.
did you read that?
Yeah, it was great. It was very, very good.
You found that interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The Up the Orphic Andy is about the Finnegan's Wake. And then the second essay, which is part 2, Silencing the Solar Theater, using the satellite conductor thing, the Solar Theater, is I say that Frank Zappa outdid Finnegan's Wake and is more important than Finnegan's Wake today. So it's a celebration of what Joyce did, and then how Frank, unconsciously in a way, took what Joyce would teach us and did it in the new medium, music, because literacy was not going to do it after World War II. So it had to be a musician as an obsolete medium, and it was not as obsolete as book.
Yeah.
So that South Soul Theater is a celebration of Frank, and that's where I lay out, as you'll see, the dwarf concept. And I'm very proud that I really, like you see what I'm saying, but I lay the underpinnings of what could be elaborated in that. It's a celebration of Frank.
Cool.
So in the end, when you see how great it is, give it to Gail and see how she reacts.
Is Dondorf still at the house?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Right.
Ask him if you would like to talk to Bob. We would love to. Have
Oh,
him
let's
down.
do the physics thing.
Yeah.
You know we're doing something.
He
good
probably
here.
won't.
You say,
though, because
Dave,
he's
you got to
still-
go over and talk to a physicist about
Yeah.
Frank's blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and give him a
I'll
copy
tell
of
you
that.
more about that later, Bob.
Oh.
We don't want to hold him up.
But the
man.
thing
He's
is that
he's been generous.
I
with his
understand
time.
that Gail's doing a book on Frank.
Well, she's doing a book on her life.
Oh, on her own
Yeah,
life, not the
yeah.
ideas levels, or maybe there'll be a bit of that in there.
I don't know. She's got a guy helping her.
Well, anyways, on the idea level, she should be aware that there's some ideas going around that might help her write her book. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, she's been working on it for a while, but I think it'll still take a while.
Yeah.
So, yeah, quite a while.
Well,
real
fucking
pleasure.
great.
Yeah.
Great
real
talking to you. I'm
pleasure.
really sure you showed up
Thanks
for
a lot
part
for
2.
your time, man.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
Oh, yeah.
it.
Super.
Yeah.